Hello everyone, welcome to the Scumdogs Kennel. I'm your host, Chris Williams, and in today's Cryptid Corner mini-episode, I have several bizarre stories to read to you today, folks. One, we have Roswell missing time, and we have this bizarre cryptid that was seen in a small Mexican town, folks, that the people there say was a manhunter. Let's get into the first article, Roswell missing time mystery, and read exactly what happened to, this experiencer and how it affected him. In the early 2000s, a new serviceman driving from Washington State to Florida described an unnerving overnight incident near Roswell, New Mexico. After pushing himself through roughly 24 hours of near continuous driving, what makes the account stand out is not just the apparent loop in space and time, but the fact that a gas station clerk later confirmed the witness had already been there hours earlier, adding to an external detail that kept the experience from feeling like a simple dream. In the early 2000s, I was stationed in the northern part of Washington. This is where I met a girl, got married, and after about a year, the Navy decided I needed to relocate to Florida. Rather than use movers, I decided to take the time off and the pay to move myself. We loaded up the truck and started driving. My plan was to go from north of Seattle to Jacksonville, Florida, via South Texas to visit family. It was a long haul, but my wife hated driving, so I figured a MapQuest printout and a pile of red bull would get us there. My intention was simple. I was going to drive until I could no longer drive. By the time I reached Roswell, New Mexico, around 1 o'clock in the morning, I had been driving for roughly 24 hours straight, only stopping for gas. I was exhausted. Coming into Roswell from the north, the first thing I remember seeing was a Walmart on the right with a giant inflatable green alien on the roof. I pulled into a gas station, bought fuel and a Red Bull, and decided we'd push on to Brownfield, Texas, then get a motel and crash. It was supposed to be about 2 hours away. We headed out on Route 380. I saw the sign that said Brownfield, 140 miles. There was almost no traffic, and I was moving pretty fast, so I figured we would be there in about an hour and 45 minutes. After about an hour, I woke my wife, who had been asleep in the passenger seat, just so I could have something to talk to and help me stay awake and alert. Then things got strange. 2 hours passed, then 3, and I was still driving through the desert. I kept wondering how in the hell a 2-hour trip had stretched on for so long when I had been speeding most of the way. Then I saw a sign that said Roswell 10 miles. That is when I started to panic. My first thought was that I must have fallen asleep at the wheel, crossed a median somewhere, turned around without realizing it, and ended up heading west instead of east. That alone was terrifying because I had no memory of doing it. But then I got closer and saw the same Walmart again, with the same giant inflatable alien. I realized I was coming into Roswell from the north on the same road I had entered on before. That made no sense. I had been driving east for hours on a different highway. There was no reasonable way I should have ended up approaching Roswell from that direction again. I pulled into the same gas station from the same direction the same guy was working. The whole place hit me with this overwhelming feeling of deja vu. I asked him if I had been there before. He said yes. He told me I had stopped there earlier at around 1 o'clock a.m. It was now almost 5 o'clock a.m. He said it had been a slow night, and he remembered that I had bought a Red Bull and gas. That is when the whole thing really sank in. It was not just in my head. Someone else remembered me being there. I asked where I could find a motel, and he pointed me down the street. I got a room and slept until around 3 o'clock that afternoon. When we got back on the road later, we started seeing the same little towns and signs we were sure we had already passed during the night. We joked about alien abduction, though neither of us really believed that. The truth is, I still do not know what happened. If I fell asleep and turned around somehow, I do not understand how neither of us noticed it. At highway speed, crossing a median should have been rough and obvious. Then we would have had to drive back through Roswell without remembering it and somehow repeat the same mistake again to end up where we did. None of that seems likely. I've considered that maybe I dreamed part of it, but the gas station clerk remembered me. That is the part I've never been able to explain away. We made it to South Texas, then on to Florida without any more problems. That was more than 20 years ago, and I still have no real answer for what happened. If it was something supernatural, which I doubt is the only thing like that I've ever experienced, mostly I have chalked it up to extreme sleep deprivation, but even now, the whole incident still bothers me B. What happened here, folks? Even B doesn't want to believe it was aliens or anything supernatural, but here we have a clear story of missing time that is reminiscent of other stories we've read about before, folks, but also almost as if it were a big practical joke, especially with how these beings seemingly set him back on the road several hundred miles from where they first took him, folks, where he had to drive through Roswell, of all places, again, on the same road. It almost feels like this man was knocked out along with his girlfriend, and they almost seemingly traveled back in time, but clearly that didn't happen, folks, because they found themselves in the same area in Roswell, driving to the same gas station again, and asked the same guy who clearly remembered them. It almost feels like it was all set up to be part of a joke or basically premise in a movie, folks, because it feels like that to me. But could it be a real alien abduction? We can discuss this point a little later, folks. Let's get on to the next article, which is titled Hunter of Men Incidents. Did a deadly otherworldly creature terrorize a remote Mexican village? Let's read on and hear about this story, folks. That could possibly be an account of a dogman or maybe some other monstrous creature that we've never encountered before, folks. Let's get into this article now and hear the experiencer's story. The following account is presented as a multi-generational family narrative tied to a village near Ocosingo, Chiapas, Mexico, and is said to date back to the 19th century. It begins with a blazing light crossing the night sky, then escalates into a sequence of disappearances, mutilation-style deaths, and a final confrontation with a terrifying skilled entity that, according to the surviving witnesses, killed only men and spared the women. Let's read on and hear exactly what happened with this account, folks, and it sounds like it could be another alien encounter as well. This story was passed down through my family for generations, from father to son, and I was told it goes back to the time of my grandfather's grandfather in the 19th century. Is not something my family ever openly discussed with outsiders because people would not believe it. But within the family, it was always treated as a true event, preserved and handed down as part of our history. My family is of Mexican origin. The place connected to this account was a village near Ocosingo in what is now Chiapas. My great-grandfather's family lived there. They were poor, as were most people in that region at the time, and they eked out a living from the land. They had a small farm, a vegetable plot, and animals such as chickens, cows, and goats. According to what I was told, they lived a simple but peaceful life. Everything changed one night when the people in the village saw an intense light streak across the sky. It moved fast, brighter than anything they had ever seen, and it seemed to fall into the forest nearby. The sight frightened everyone in those days. There was no aircraft, no electric lights, none of the things that might make sense of such an event. The villagers gathered and talked late into the night, trying to understand what they had seen. The next morning, several men, including my ancestor, went out to search the forest in the direction of where the light had seemed to fall. They searched a wide area and found nothing. There was no wreckage, no fire, no crater, nothing out of the ordinary. They returned to the village and reported that they had found no trace of whatever had crossed the sky. That calmed some people, though not completely. The mystery remained. For a time, life returned to normal. Then one day, a farmer who lived nearby went out to search for a steer that had wandered away and failed to come home. When darkness came and he still had not returned, his family asked neighbors for help. Several men went out with lamps and torches and searched the nearby woods, but they found nothing that night. The next day, they resumed the search, and this time they found him. He was dead in the forest, and what they saw shocked the entire village. His body had been torn open from the neck down to the waist. His internal organs were gone. It looked as though something had attacked him, opened the body, and removed what was inside. This was unheard of in the region. There had been thefts now and then, petty things, but no murders of this kind. The authorities from the nearest town were called. They examined the scene as best they could, but with the limited resources of the time, they came to no firm conclusion. They could not say what kind of weapon or force had caused the wounds. The man was burned, but the fear remained. A few weeks later, another resident disappeared. He had gone toward a nearby waterfall and did not come back by nightfall. Again, people searched through the night and found nothing. The next day, they discovered his body beyond the waterfall. He, too, had been brutally killed. The body was badly torn, and once again, the internal organs were missing. Panic began to spread. This sort of sounds like a cattle mutilation here, folks, but there's also an air of mythos about it. Like, basically, this is too bizarre and sounds like basically a tall tale told around a campfire story, folks. Because in those kinds of stories, folks, a monster or killer removing people's internal organs isn't unheard of, folks. So maybe we should consider this story a campfire story and leave it like that. But let's read on and make no real conclusions until after we discuss it a bit more. The authorities returned and again suggested that a wild animal might be responsible, but the villagers did not believe it. If some beast had killed these men, why did it remove only the internal organs and leave the rest of the bodies behind? Why kill in such a deliberate and repeated way? A week later, a young man disappeared after going fishing. His parents had warned him not to go alone, but he ignored them. He was later found on a riverbank, decapitated, with his chest ripped open and his internal organs gone. At that point, fear became hysteria. People demanded answers in the village. There was an older woman, described as part gypsy and part seer, who told them this was not the work of men and not the work of any known animal. She said it came from something outside ordinary understanding. Her words passed from house to house and only deepened the terror. Finally, an older resident decided that the only option was to gather a group of men and hunt whatever was responsible. 5 men agreed to go. They armed themselves with revolvers and rifles because they feared the thing might be supernatural. They asked the seer to accompany them. Her granddaughter went as well, partly to assist and partly to stay close to her. The next morning, the group entered the forest. According to the testimony later given by the 2 women, they searched for most of the day and eventually found strange footprints. They said these tracks were unlike those of any man and unlike those of any known animal known to them. Even so, they continued. After traveling further, they stopped in a clearing to rest and eat. They were exhausted and beginning to think the search had been useless. They then heard something moving through the woods. The sound came fast. The men took up their weapons and listened as whatever it was began circling them through the brush at tremendous speed. They could hear leaves and branches thrashing. They could see the vegetation moving, but they could not see what was making the noise. Then it came out. The women described a tall creature with a gray, scaled body, large teeth, claws on its hands, and reddish eyes. It burst from the forest with tremendous speed and immediately attacked the men. According to the account, the creature killed all 5 of them in moments. Their bodies were torn apart. 2 were decapitated. It was swift, violent, and overwhelming. After killing the men, the creature let out a roar and turned toward the 2 women who were on the ground in shock and expecting to die. But instead of attacking them, it stopped and looked them over from head to toe as though studying them. Then it turned away and vanished back into the forest at high speed. The 2 women eventually made their way back to the village and told what had happened. When they were asked what they believed the creature was, the older woman called it El Diablo, but because it had killed only the men and spared the women, the villagers began calling it El Cazador, de Hombres, the hunter of men. After that massacre, the authorities sent a larger force into the area. The forest was searched again, but nothing was found. Yet the story did not end there. About 2 weeks later, another resident was found dead in the same manner. A month later, a husband and wife were traveling by wagon toward Ogo Singo when the creature attacked. According to the woman, it sprang from the thick forest, leaped onto the wagon, threw her husband to the ground, and tore him open with its claws. Then, just as before, it approached her, examined her without harming her, and disappeared back into the woods. After that last killing, the attacks stopped. Nothing more was found. No explanation was ever given. No one in the village forgot what had happened. My grandfather said that his own grandfather swore the story was true because he personally saw the bodies brought back to the village. He said the sight was so terrible that it stayed with him for the rest of his life. The questions were never answered. What was that thing? Where did it come from? Why did it kill only men? Indeed, folks, why? We'll save off on any explanations until I finish off the article. Did it have anything to do with the mysterious light that crossed the sky before the deaths began? And perhaps most chilling of all, where did it go and could it return somewhere else? I know nothing beyond what was handed down in my family. Those who claimed to witness these events are long gone now. I do not wish to be contacted. Those who do not believe can dismiss it if they wish. But one thing I learned from my father, my grandfather, and the generations before them is this: never doubt what may exist in the universe, however incredible it may seem, because one day you may see something that changes your life forever. Indeed, folks, I agree with that. Well, little tidbit of information. If you saw this thing, folks, it would indeed change how you perceive the world, because this entity is anything but normal. Could it have been a misidentified animal? It doesn't sound like it. It sounds like it basically was on 2 legs, and it doesn't sound like it was a bear, folks. I suppose it could basically be an animal with mange, maybe indeed a bear, but I kind of doubt it. I've seen a few animals with mange, folks, and they can truly look bizarre because of how unordinary they look, folks. But this sounds like this animal was intelligent to some level degree. It was going after men. Perhaps it was tasked with gathering maybe organs and maybe other physiological and, bodily, parts from basically men. And basically, it was not ordered to basically attack any women, perhaps, by whoever controlled it. Indeed, folks, maybe this entity was an alien being, and it was sent here basically to gather materials and stuff like that. And it was not interested in the woman because it was not part of its operating purview, as it were, folks. If indeed was some sort of alien entity here for a mission. Either way, folks, very interesting, but we're now at the end, so please go subscribe to my YouTube channel. Read comics that are bad for you. You can use the YouTube link down below in the descriptions or the chat to go subscribe to me. Hit that like button for me. Make sure you're still subscribed. Leave some comments down below. Hit that bell for notifications. Hit the part of the bell that'll give you all future notifications. And please share this video out. I'm Chris Williams from the Scumdogs Kennel. Thank you all for joining me. I'll be back again tomorrow with another great video. So be sure to come back again then. Until next time, folks, I'll see you all again soon. So bye.